Welcome, everybody. Really happy to see all of you, and I'm so thrilled that we have this amazing turnout. I wanted to let you know there's a few more seats over here. If anybody wants to come onto this side of the room, you're welcome to come sit down. So we hope that everybody feels mobilized from this exciting panel that we have tonight, and that we can really start working together to make a difference in our in relation to climate change. It's going to take individual and collective action. It's going to take all of us from everywhere in order to meet the audacious goals of this Green New Deal, which is a really exciting new proposal, and the promise of a sustainable and even regenerative infrastructure, which may be both social and economic infrastructure that we can build together. Science tells us it's going to get worse before it gets better, which makes it even more imperative for us to come together in our communities to build resiliency at every level. So this talk is a part of the World Business Academy's Global Citizens Club, and where we bring interesting speakers together on and explore timely topics that have global importance and local relevance. That the old mantra of think globally but act locally, that's sort of how what infuses the Global Citizens Club. And our work here and other aspects of the work we do in the community is supported by generous donors, and especially the actual members of the Global Citizens Club. The El Encanto Hotel is our generous partner in that, and they actually donate this space to us. So I want to thank them. Yeah. And the Academy and the other co-sponsoring partners here want to just, we want to be champions of this community, and that's not possible without support from people, whether it's just showing up like you are tonight, being a volunteer, or supporting us financially however you can. So now I would like to invite up Rinaldo Brutoco, who's our moderator for the evening. And among other impressive roles that he's had in the business world and nonprofit world, he's our founder and president of the Academy, and I feel very honored to get to work with him. He's a brilliant solutions thinker and has spent his career trying to make this a better world. So, Rinaldo, come on up. Yeah.
So welcome, everybody. Did you guys know you just sat behind each other, Mark and David? Turn around, David, Mark, David. I told you both about each other. Okay. So one of the cute things about this, what we're doing here tonight, the Global Citizens Club, when Christy said that we have a policy which is $25 a month, or $300 a year, and you get to be in the Global Citizens Club. Those discounts, by the way, at this hotel are good 7 days a week. Not the rooms are discounted, but not as well as they are Sunday through Thursday. But the 15% off on the spa, the dinners, the food and beverage, good 7 days a week. And the part she didn't emphasize enough, which I think is key to tonight, is it doesn't matter whether you give that $25 a month to us or some other good charity in Santa Barbara. The point is, you're in the game. You're a global citizen. And so we'd love it if you want to contribute to us. That's great. But if you've got some other favorite charity, that's fine with me too, because you're in the game. We're all in this together. And that's why we have the co-sponsors we do. That's why we support 350.org. That's why we support what the Chumash are doing. That's why we support what's going on with climate mobilization and other groups here in town. So what I urge you all to do is take advantage of tonight to be a chance to see what it looks like and sounds like as we all pull together common solutions to common challenges. Because that's what we're about, common solutions to common challenges. And I'm going to introduce our panelists in a moment. Before I do that, though, we were really fortunate that Bill McKibben offered to make a statement for us. So I think we have that on a video right there. And by the way, I should also say, this is all being videoed. All of our meetings are videoed. And if you like what happens here tonight, or you think some part of it was really worth doing and sharing, please feel free to tell someone, and we'll get them a copy. We'll get them a link of this. There's no reason for anybody to miss it, even if they're not in the room. So with that said, I'm not sure who's going to thread up that video, but if they're ready, kill the house lights.
Hello, everybody. This is Bill McKibben. I wish that I was there with you in person, of course, because Santa Barbara is one of the great places in the world, and because y'all are doing great work. But it's good, too, that we're learning to do more and more of this by low-carbon means. So let's just talk about where we are and what an important moment it is and how important the climate mobilization is in trying to make all this happen. You know that I wrote the first book about climate change 30 years ago, back when it was an abstract and theoretical threat. And Californians, more than most, know that it's no longer abstract or theoretical in any way, that it's now the new lived reality of people's daily lives. And just as important, that it's part of our psychological condition now. No Californian thinks quite the same about the seasons, knowing what the wildfire risks are and so on. So it's been in many ways a wasted 30 years. We haven't done the things that scientists and others of us said we should be doing. And so now we're in a very difficult situation. We're in an emergency. And that's why the work that Margaret Klein Salamon and others at Climate Mobilization is doing so important. That work, might be best summarized as we need to make a radical, quick transition to renewable energy, and we need to stop digging up dirty energy. We need to keep it in the ground. And the good news is that on both these fronts, we have real possibilities now in a way that we didn't even a few years ago. The engineers have done their job and brought the price of renewable energy down to a point where it's not only possible to imagine, but where new studies show it's by far the cheapest option going forward, cheaper to power North America that way than with business as usual fossil fuel consumption. That's terrific, and what it means is that it's possible to build a powerful political demand for that transition to happen. I think that there's someone there from the Sunrise Movement today. Look at the remarkable job that they are doing in pushing out this Green New Deal that the rest of us have fallen in behind. That's really exciting to see the energy unleashed here and to see the fact that it struck a chord with people of all kinds. 60% of Republicans were in favor of some form of a Green New Deal in recent polling. So it's remarkable. That transition alone isn't enough. We also have to figure out how to keep fossil fuel in the ground. And that's why the plan to take on all the new oil wells planned for the county there is so important. It's not just that they threaten the groundwater. It's not just that you've got lots of kind of offshore issues and new pipeline plans and stuff always going on as long as you're doing that kind of work. It's also because when it doesn't spill, the carbon and all that oil spills into the atmosphere. It's the thing that drives the wildfires. It's why the ocean level keeps rising. If we can't keep it in the ground, then we cannot have the world that we are used to having. And so it's entirely appropriate that people talk about this in the right terms, as an emergency, as one that we need a mobilization for, a mobilization like the last time we had a New Deal, a mobilization like the time that we had to fight fascism in Europe. The stakes are extraordinarily high. And that's why it's so good that y'all are putting your minds to it, putting your hearts to it, and putting your shoulders to it, probably most importantly. We've got a ton of work to do, and you are the ones who have to do it, and thank you in advance for getting it done.
So with the invocation that we heard from the Chumash Indians in mind, and the work that they're doing not only with the Standing Rock Coalition, but the invocation, as you recall, was much broader than that. It was aimed at what we do to Mother Earth. So I just want to share with you the one deviation tonight from our normal policy of these meetings, the Global Citizens Club, which is to think globally but act locally. The one deviation tonight is we are not in any way, shape, or form going to do something that's even-handed or balanced. Normally, we try to present both sides of every argument so people can ask questions and take their pick. This is one upon which we think there is no other side. This is about the survival of human civilization. And I'll just tell you one quick story. Someone once asked me, well, what do you say to someone when you encounter them and they tell you that they don't believe in climate change? And I say, well, I don't say much because that's a religious belief. It's not a science belief, it's a religious belief. And I point out that in 1492, 99.9% of the population of the world believed the earth was flat. It turns out there is no such thing as the flat earth theory anymore, because the earth isn't flat. So how could you have a theory about it? And there's no question, there is no theory that says climate change isn't real, because it is. And there's no theory that says that climate change isn't here now, because it is. And there's no theory that says that climate change isn't going to terminate human civilization as we know it in a relatively short period of time, because it will. So with that in mind, there is no other side to this argument. And what we're really here today to talk about is what can we do about it? And we're really blessed, I think, to have tonight with us Supervisor Joan Hartmann, who's going to go first. For those of you who know, I'm an unabashed supporter, so I will declare my bias right now. And I think that we're lucky to have Supervisor Hartmann because of her background as an environmental attorney, as a professor in the Claremont schools, as now a county supervisor for us, and someone who's trying to help us lead the fight on appropriate environmental action in our county, supported by a couple other very good supervisors too. I don't mean to in any way diminish the role that Doss Williams is playing or that Greg Hart will play now in the future. But I want to really thank Joan for coming tonight. Supervisor Hartmann, would you please share a few words with us?
Let's see, am I on? Yes. Thank you, Rinaldo, and the World Business Academy, and everybody who's here tonight, and my fellow panelists. I'm glad I get to go first, if anybody's heard them speak. It's intimidating. But I can't let the flute music go unremarked. That was so haunting and really spoke to me, a blessing and a prayer about where we are today. It really affected me emotionally. I'm going to talk about what the county is doing, and I'll admit it up front, it's too little. And we need to mobilize, and we need your help. But let me run down what we are doing, and then why it's clear that it's not enough, and some ideas about the future. So the first thing the county has to do, anybody has to do, is audit and clean up your own house. And so the county indeed has a South Coast solar generation facility that powers much of its campus here in the South Coast. And that has turned out to be very cost effective. And so now we're doing an audit in the Betaravian Santa Maria Center and our other buildings to see how we retrofit and where we can get solar, where we have battery storage. So we're doing that. We're also just launched an analysis of our fleet. We need to reduce vehicle miles traveled, and we need to move to electric. So for the county, that means what proportion of our vehicles can be electric, and where do we put in the infrastructure? And that'll be coming up in the next few months, and the board needs to make a decision about how much money we're willing to pay to begin to transform our fleet, and what percentage we're gonna move, and how quickly to electric. The other thing that we're involved in is permitting commercial energy projects. And our first project was in Kiama, where carrots were being grown basically with ancient water, and now that was converted to solar energy. I think a very smart move, and we recently approved an expansion of that facility there. And there's also the Lompoc Strauss wind project that is in the permit process, wending its way through. So we're cleaning up our own house, and we're trying to promote permitting of commercial solar throughout the county. We're also involved in something called the Clean Energy Roadmap. We began when the Elwood peaker plant, thanks to some work by people up here, was not permitted to be expanded. Yes, and what that means is we were looking in South County with Southern California Edison to see how else we can reduce demand, manage demand, storage, and build more clean energy opportunities here in the South County. And the county took leadership with our sustainability program and brought other jurisdictions in. And so it's worked with nonprofits and cities, and it's been a really good effort to try to identify all the opportunities we have in South Santa Barbara County. Now we're in the process of looking, and we're soon to issue a report about North County as well. And for me, in my district, the 3rd district, which stretches from Isla Vista to Guadalupe and includes the Santa Ynez Valley, it's very important to think about the drought and what that means for a lot of the cattle ranches. And do we have opportunities where we could have commercial solar where it's, at least, we don't know what these rains, how long they'll last, but the drought and cattle is harder on the land. So can we give other opportunities to agricultural interests up there? And instead of making them do the environmental review, we would take that on. We are taking that on from the county and identifying areas where there's where the land is suitable, where there's transmission capacity, where there's not conflicts with other uses. And so we're trying to take that burden on from the counties as a way to encourage the landowners then to step up and install solar in North County. We're also still working on community choice energy, and this is a little tricky because we are served by 2 different investor-owned utilities, South County by Southern California Edison, North County by PG&E. And the rules for community choice energy are that you have to offer it for the whole county. But we've done several analyses, and it's very different for the different parts of the county. Southern California Edison has a different pricing structure. And in addition to this, the PUC keeps changing the rules, and now we've got PG&E in bankruptcy. So we haven't given up on community choice energy. I assume most people know what that is, but basically, I see Sigrid right back there. She knows what it is because she's been working on this for many, many years. It is a way to capture the funding. The local entity becomes the deliverer of energy, and you can reinvest the profits back into renewable energy. That may have been my timer, but I'll finish here. We also have a climate action plan, and unfortunately what we learned with our last review is that our GHG emissions are up 14%. And this is just in the unincorporated county, but we're now working with other jurisdictions as well to go forward and look at the entire county and all the jurisdictions and what their emissions are. So that's kind of the bad news, 14% up, even when we're trying to do it better. The other bad news is that we have 760 enhanced steam injection wells in the permit process coming to the county with 3 different companies, Era Energy, ERG, and PetroRock, that could emit up to 700,000 metric tons per year greenhouse gases. It's a scale unseen in this county by any set of operations, and it's basically, Rinaldo has described them as the tar sands. So these are moving forward. The draft EIRs are done, and those are coming to the Planning Commission, and then they'll come to the Board of Supervisors on appeal from one side or another. And so technically, I will sit in a quasi-judicial role, but I was on the Planning Commission when we, in Santa Barbara County, instituted the most rigorous demanding greenhouse gas emission threshold for stationary sources at 1 metric ton. So between 1 metric ton and 100 metric tons, we require local mitigation. And how they would mitigate these greenhouse gas emissions is going to be the first question I will be asking. So, despite the critical need to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, we're adding them faster than at any time in human history. In Santa Barbara County, where the environmental movement was born, we're no different. There was a recent article in The Economist. ExxonMobil is planning to increase production 13% by 2030, and the other majors are right in line with that. So at the same time, the new IPCC report said that we have 11 years to act. And if we'd started in 2000, we could be reducing 2% a year, but now we're to a point where we need to be reducing by 5% a year. We found in our own US report, 13 different agencies determined that our economy would suffer a 10% loss. That's greater than the Great Recession. So we have lots of reason to act, and we find that now 73% of Americans actually acknowledge that global warming exists. But you ask them further, what will you pay? And they won't agree to pay $10 a month. So we have our work cut out for us. And I attended and got to hear Rose speak at the Granada at the 50-year commemoration of the oil blowout here in Santa Barbara. And it was really inspiring to hear her voice and her generation's voice. We need to act, and the Greenpeace speaker said, we've got reports and studies, and we had Al Gore with his PowerPoint and his Academy Award, but somehow people aren't getting it. It's a failure of imagination. We need to get to the creative arts. We need to get people to understand what this means, not in their head, but in their hearts.
So one piece of good news, we did a series of emails about 2 years ago on the oil platforms out here in the channel, which gave rise to the First Earth Day. And in those, we talked about converting them because the current law says that when their contract is over, they have to take those away, to pull them down and take them away. And we said that's a crazy idea because they have become marine environments. They are actually now miniature little marine hatcheries. And so we said, what would be better ideas, like, just take the oil drilling stuff off the top and let's make them into wind farms. Vertical windmills, supporting windmills in the water. So like a lot of our stuff that, nobody reads for 10 years and they go, oh, that's obvious. I want you to know that Standard Oil of California has just adopted a similar policy. They now believe that that is perhaps the best way to treat those platforms. So even the oil companies are coming along. And I can't wait, Supervisor Hartmann, till you can vote for that one. I also want to just share with you quickly, Bill McKibben said something in that tape which is really important because it goes to the rest of what our panel's about tonight. He said that the engineers did their job, quote unquote, and solar energy is now cheaper than fossil fuels. When those of you in the room remember that we stopped the peaker plant not only in Elwood, but the one in Oxnard, California, which is a community that's 78% a community of color, with very little political power. When we stopped that one, and we lost all the way up, as we usually do in front of the Public Utilities Commission, the California Energy Commission wrote a letter, 3 of the 5 commissioners, and they said, We don't think you made the right decision on deciding to put a new peaker plant with fossil fuels here for 40 years because the petitioners, that's us, said that they could do this with solar energy and storage. And if that's true, that's a better solution than fossil fuels. So if you send this decision to us the way it currently reads, we're going to turn it down. And it was signed by 3 of the 5 California Energy Commissioners. That's never happened before in the state of California. And as a result, PUC backed down. That plant is now dead. Ten days ago, Mayor Garcetti basically mothballed a similar proposal for a huge expansion and a renewal of the license of the peaker plant for LA and said, we're not going to do it. The end of peaker plants has arrived because the economics are better with solar than with fossil fuel. And I with all due respect to Supervisor Hartmann, I believe that people think it's going to cost them $10 more. And the answer is it's going to put $10 more in their pocket. That's the truth. It's cheaper. It's actually cheaper. Okay, with that in mind, I can't wait to introduce our next guest because it is a supreme honor for me. I really credit this next speaker who came and was kind enough to be on our radio show last Friday. Margaret Klein Salamon, who was referred to by Bill in the tape, is the executive director of Climate Mobilization. Like her, we believe this requires a World War II type effort. And if you really want to know how much money a green environment's going to create, I would urge you to look at the economy of the United States of America in 1939 and compare it to the economy of the United States of America in 1947, the year I was born. It turns out we got really rich by doing the right thing. We mobilized. We saved democracy for the free world, and in the process, we built the Western democracy that's been running the world ever since. The same or better awaits us if Margaret Klein Salamon is successful, and I believe she will be, with her efforts at climate mobilization. And I'm really honored to introduce you because I think what you're doing is legendary, and I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart.
Thank you, Rinaldo, Christy, the World Business Academy, and also thank you to the local Santa Barbara members of the Climate Mobilization, Grace, Emiliano, and Bob. Very exciting. The mission of the Climate Mobilization is to initiate World War II scale climate mobilization that protects humanity and the natural world from the climate apocalypse. We exist to push the climate movement farther, to say more ambition, more strength, faster. And we do this on several levels. On the individual level, where we empower people to join this most important fight. We have local mobilization laboratories, particularly happening in the Bay Area and in Los Angeles. We're working on the state level, where Green New Deal and climate emergency resolutions and legislation is being prepared in New York State and in California. We're providing national guidance for a potential declaration of climate emergency at the congressional level, and we're working with presidential candidates to get them to embrace the strongest possible climate message. And we're working internationally. Our climate emergency declaration campaign, which has started on the local level, has exploded internationally. More than 300 cities in the United States, the United Kingdom, Canada, especially Quebec, where they got like 250 cities, and Australia. This campaign has taken off with these cities declaring a climate emergency and committing to mobilization for zero emissions by 2030. Where the local climate mobilization group here in Santa Barbara is working on just that type of declaration here. And we do it all these things that we've accomplished, and this shift in the climate movement that you might have noticed in the last several months, like, wow, that's a lot more ambition than we've been hearing recently. We've accomplished all of this with one tool, and that's telling the truth. It might seem like common sense, but for decades, the climate and environmental movement have held back from telling the truth. And so as a clinical psychologist, which is my training, I came into this work 5 years ago with the question, why are we committing passive suicide as a country and as a species? Do we want to die? Or are we blocked from responding to this crisis with the intensity that it needs? The truth is that everything we love and care about and value is in danger. The truth is that I'm in danger, you're in danger, our families are in danger, everything is on the line. And the common sense solution is to fight this crisis with everything that we have. And that's what this country did in World War II. In just a few years, not decades, we mobilized our entire economy and society for a common purpose, winning the war. We transformed our industrial capacity into a war material production machine that armed the Allies, rebuilt our own armed forces, and as Rinaldo was saying, just totally transformed our economy. We can do it again, but only if we accept intellectually and emotionally the scale and urgency of this crisis. We can do it only if we take responsibility personally for stopping this. To say, this climate crisis, this is not going to happen on my watch. I am not going to let this happen. That was the mentality with which I started the climate mobilization and the mentality that it has brought to the climate movement. And I am so happy to say that it is the mentality that the climate movement is now adopting. In the last 4 months, we have seen, actually 3 months, we have seen such a breakthrough with Extinction Rebellion and the school strikers in the streets, with Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez bringing the Green New Deal into Congress, backed up by the Sunrise Movement, an incredibly brave and truth-based organization. We've seen these cities around the world say, this is an emergency, and business as usual, gradual solutions are not going to cut it. With this kind of transformation, the name of this program tonight is that 2019 is the year for climate mobilization, and I really believe that. We wrapped up 2018 with a huge burst of enthusiasm, and we have started out this year very strong. This is the year that we as the movement can set the agenda for the congressional and presidential elections. We have seen, because of Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez's leadership and the Sunrise Movement and a coalition of organizations, we have seen more than 80 members of the House of Representatives and 9 senators, including almost all of the prominent presidential candidates, signing on to a World War II scale climate mobilization that brings the United States to net zero emissions in 10 years. That is a huge breakthrough. So the table is set, the stage is set, everything is ready, and all that we need is you. We need everyone to say, this is it, this is the time, and I am going all in to solve this crisis. I'm not gonna hold back because this is the year. This is our last chance. We have to get this done. I cannot tell you how important it is, and I think you already know. So for a long time, the climate mobilization felt really alone. We felt like we were screaming the truth into a void or something like that. But those days are over, and the truth is actually on the agenda now. And it's up to us to build the power to elect the right people and to build the power to hold them accountable. I think we all have a lot of power right now, probably much more than we might even realize. And it's time to get really serious. So yeah, I urge everyone to join the climate emergency movement, which does not advocate for a gradual transition off of fossil fuels or industrial agriculture, but rather advocates for an emergency mobilization that breaks out of normal mode and pulls out all the stops. In World War II, we transitioned our economy through incredibly strong regulation, massive investment, and by bringing everyone in. We have everything we need. The technology is there. All we need is the will. And I think we can do it.
You know, one of my favorite lines for those of you who hang around these events with us is, I read a lot, as you know, I've never read about, heard about, seen any problem that human civilization faces that cannot be solved with today's resources and technology. We have that. What we lack is the will. And what Margaret Klein Salamon is talking about is changing that will. It's no longer acceptable. And with all due respect to the IPCC that said we have 11 years to go, they're wrong. If you read my stuff, we passed that point about 8 years ago. So the bottom line is, this is a crisis of massive proportions. You're looking at the end of human civilization as we know it within the next 35 years. How many of you have children or grandchildren that will be alive in 35 years? Show of hands. Okay, do you want them to face a dystopian future? A future where they will be envious of those of us who are gone. That's what's coming. And that's not a maybe. That's a for sure. That's an absolutely certain outcome. And we can solve it. We have the technology. We have the resources. And as Bill observed, Bill McKibben, we've spent 30 years trying to do what's practical, and it hasn't done any good. Because here's where we are today. And so I want to just introduce our next speaker by also referring to Bill. He referred quickly to, as did Margaret a moment ago, to the Sunrise Movement. And we are very, very grateful to have as our third panelist tonight, Rose Strauss. If you have not seen the video that went viral of the candidate for governor of Pennsylvania who did not win after that viral video, don't know if it's a cause and effect, but probably helped. In this viral video, she asked a very prescient set of questions about climate change and about what it meant to people, particularly of her generation, because guess where she's going to be in 35 years? So she asked this question, and he put her down as young and naive. And in the process, he launched her visibility, because what Rose represents tonight is the Sunrise Movement. Now, the Sunrise Movement took the work of Margaret Klein Salamon. Because of the involvement with people like Bernie Sanders 2 years ago and AOC, she got involved because of the Bernie Sanders thing. She was part of them in Queens. All of a sudden now we have the Green New Deal. And for anybody who says that the Green New Deal is not practical, they don't understand what it is. It is not a series of proposed pieces of legislation. It is a series of outcomes that we have subscribed to, that we insist are the minimum outcome to the world that's going to be livable again for us. It's time to restore Mother Earth. It's time to respect, as Emilio reported from the Chumash people, the way we treat Gaia, and we have to stop puncturing her. We have to start treating her as the mother she is. The Sunrise Movement is the proponent that's trying to get us there, and Rose Strauss is our extremely articulate spokesperson from UCSB. Rose, please take it from here.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you guys all so much for being here tonight and listening to this presentation. I didn't know anyone else was not going to be using one, but yes, I love presentations. So I'm Rose. I'm 19, and I am here as a representative of Sunrise Movement. We're a movement of young people working really hard to stop climate change and create millions of good jobs in the process. I'm just going to go through kind of a brief history of Sunrise, why we're doing what we're doing, how we got here, and what we're thinking about moving forward. Okay, so first thing that we talk about in Sunrise, climate change is happening and it's hurting people right now. So right off the bat, we are completely done with the narrative of talking about if climate change is real, what it's doing possibly in the future. We go straight to the fact that it's happening right now and hurting people right now. And in Santa Barbara, we know very well the impacts of climate change as a community who's been really hit hard by natural disasters. Second thing is that we have the solutions and that they're ready when we are. We know that the solar energy industry employs way more people than the entire fossil fuel industry combined. And if you see those little blue squares up there, that's the amount of solar energy it would take to power the entire United States, which is pretty crazy. So what gives? Why have we not made this transition yet? Why are we still stuck in this place? Well, Sunrise is of the belief fossil fuel CEOs and corrupt politicians are blocking action, and nobody is holding them accountable. So we think that they're doing this in a super deliberate way. They have like a three-pronged strategy of doing this. The first thing is deceiving the people. The second thing is buying up politicians. And the third thing is consolidating power within the government. So the first one, deceiving the people. So this is kind of showing a progression of the fossil fuel industries and the way that they've changed their narrative on climate change. In 1978, ExxonMobil acknowledged the fact that climate change is happening and said that we have 5 to 10 years to stop this crisis. And then they denied it. They said, I don't really know what's happening with climate change. We could have to solve it pretty soon, maybe a while in the future. We don't really know, kind of spreading misinformation. And then they deflected responsibility. They said, sorry, we can know that climate change is happening, but the demand for fossil fuels is endless and we're not going to do anything to stop it. Second thing is buying out politicians. So you guys probably know Charles and David Koch, but we learned about the Koch brothers in Sunrise and that they have $86 billion and put all of that money towards trying to stop any action on climate change. That means that they have 86 billion reasons to block action on climate change. And this is a really terrifying graph of spending in the 2016 elections. You can see the Democratic Party in red, the Republican Party in green, and the Koch network in yellow. So we have discovered that we actually have a third party in the United States that we have been blissfully unaware of. That last thing is consolidating power within the government. So we know that Mike Pompeo, he's actually been called the congressman from Koch because he's received the most donations from the Koch brothers, and now he's representing us to the entire world. So we're basically saying, hi, the United States is a country that is run by fossil fuel corporations. So what Sunrise has said, in light of all these facts, is that we have to take over. So, Sunrise is a movement of young people who are trying to stop climate change and create millions of good jobs in the process. So we're done with the narrative that we have to choose between jobs and stopping climate change. We can do both. And we're going to do this by making climate change an urgent priority in politics and the corrupting influence of fossil fuel corporations and executives, and electing politicians who are actually going to represent us. So this is kind of like a timeline of what Sunrise has been up to so far. Sunrise has been involved for like a little bit over a year and a half. It's been existing, which is a pretty short time. I got involved a year ago. I just graduated from high school, and I saw a Facebook ad, and it said, Sunrise, join a movement of young people trying to stop climate change. And I said, oh my God, of course. And then I clicked on the ad, and it said, move to somewhere in the United States and take 6 months off of school to stop climate change in the midterm elections. And I said, oh my God, of course. And I was like, parents, I'm moving to Pennsylvania to live with activists. And they were like, no, you're not, but I did. And yeah, that's kind of how I got to where I was in Sunrise semester, which is where we had that massive intervention in the midterm elections, which was really great. And then we were kind of building up all this momentum after we helped the Democrats win back the House. We were like, now it's time to hold these people accountable. Oops. Let's go to D.C. and ask Nancy Pelosi to have a resolution for a select committee on a Green New Deal. And Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez came to our training the night before. She stood in a folding table and she said, we're with you guys. We are with you on this fight. And now you have people who are in office who are going to stand with you guys, and you have activists who are in office. So that was amazing. And the next day she came to her action, and I was actually speaking at that action, and she walked in the door right as I was speaking and listened to me speak for a few, which was really cool. And she brought tons of media there, and then the Green New Deal exploded, and it was awesome, and it is still exploding to this day. So you guys all know the Green New Deal is amazing, and it's really the first time we've seen a solution to climate change that actually scales the issue, which is so important and is actually like, we haven't really had anything to rally around before this as something that could actually fit the crisis, but now we do. So that's something that young people have really been really excited about, because it's something more concrete than we've ever seen. And you guys kind of know all this, but this isn't the presentation we give people. Lots of good stuff is going to come out of the Green New Deal. Decarbonize our economy within 10 years, basically doing everything in line with what the IPCC was talking about. And so that's really important. And doing it in a way that's really prioritizing frontline communities most impacted by climate change, justice, and the economy in this transition. So this is no longer an issue of like the environment or conservation. This is an issue of our lives, and it's become so pressing in my life and the lives of the hundreds and hundreds of other young people who are in Sunrise. So to recap, our reality now is that we have 12 years left to stop climate change, a little bit less now. Meanwhile, establishment Democrats and many other politicians have still not been taking the action that we need on this issue. They've still been making excuses to mandate a Green New Deal, and we're seeing that right now. So right now, what Sunrise is saying is no more excuses. This is not okay. So moving forward, what is our strategy? We're going to keep exposing the urgency of a crisis. Every time we have a natural disaster, we are going to relentlessly say, this is being made worse by climate change. And we're going to bring that into the media. The second thing is we're going to keep pushing the Green New Deal. We're putting everything we have into making this a reality. We're going to keep going to a representative's office, and we are not going to give up, because this is the crisis of our lifetimes. So leading into 2019, we're going February into March right now. Right now in California, we're mobilizing lots of activists, kind of bringing the movement to the West Coast, because it's been really in the East Coast so far. We're having a huge training March 1st in LA, which we're planning right now. And we're going to build people power leading up to the first presidential debate. And in that presidential debate, we're going to bring 10,000 young people there and demand that they talk about climate change and demand that they talk about the Green New Deal. Because did you know that in 2016, they didn't even mention climate change once? So that's not going to happen this time around. Thank you guys so much for listening. I'm so excited to see what we're going to be doing. And yeah, if you guys want to get involved with Sunrise, let me know, and we can find a way to plug you in, because it's exciting stuff.
You're great, Russ. For those of you who remember, the World Business Academy about 4 or 5 years ago, I think now, produced a document called the California Moonshot, which eventually became a video. I urge you to look at it. It's 40 minutes long and it's really quite good, in which we laid out the case where you could take California to 100% green in 10 years or less at no additional cost to ratepayers. So if you didn't know that's possible, it is. So telling me you could do it on the national level is absolutely doable. It's doable. In fact, if we did mobilize, we would achieve it, and that's why we're here tonight, is to let people know that it's not only possible, it's the only rational choice. So many ask why climate mobilization, and I ask why not climate mobilization when the outcome is so obvious. And whatever Werner said, I'm happy about it. Okay, now, the will to do it. All we lack is the will to do it. And okay, the quote that Matt's throwing me at the front desk here is that when John Kennedy was asking Wernher von Braun, what does it take to get a man on the moon in 10 years or less? And von Braun responded, all it takes is the will to do it. And if we can land a person on the moon in 9 years flat, I got to tell you, we can get off of fossil fuel. Okay. So we ran a little over. If someone wants to leave at precisely 7 o'clock, please do so. But we are going to do some panelist questions now. I'd like to get some questions from the floor or comments. Feel free and direct them. Anybody got a question or a comment for the panel? Everybody agrees. Right here. Well, hold on. It's going to be a microphone because it's all on video. Thanks.
Hi, Rose. Quick question. Is the Sunrise Movement prominent in more red states where they're still denying climate change?
Yeah, so we were doing a lot of our organizing during the midterms in swing states where it really mattered a lot. And there were definitely, like where I was, a significant amount of Republicans and people who were denying climate change, and that's one of the most important places that we can be doing work. With the Green New Deal, what's super important about it is it has like this bipartisan support. So we actually are having a speaking tour that's going to be launching very, very soon, where we're going to be going to states that are more red and talking to people about why the Green New Deal makes sense and why it's going to be so important for people to be voting on supporting in red states. So yeah, definitely.
Whoa. Oh, microphone, because we got video going here. We want to preserve the brilliance of this question for all time.
Of course. I just wondered if you were already starting to mobilize high school students as well, because they've proven the last couple of years that they can really make a difference.
Yeah, so I actually am one of the 2 people from Sunrise leading the National High School campaign. So we are definitely mobilizing high schoolers. What we're doing is we're having Green New Deal resolutions being passed in local city governments and board of supervisors. Those are all going to be dropping this week, actually, which is really cool, and doing another round of them. But yes, high schoolers are so important in this fight, and I have always, like throughout my time as an organizer, even when I was in high school, I was like, this is the most important thing, to get these young people, because they're place-based and they can make such a big impact locally. So for sure. And we're going to try to be doing that in Santa Barbara. So if you know any high schoolers here who want to get involved, please let me know.
By the way, I'd like for everybody to observe something interesting. When you hear the pundits talk about how the Democratic Party, if it doesn't track to the right a little further to the middle road, they won't be able to recapture those Obama voters who are centrists, and gee, how are they going to ever win if they do that? And the answer is, people like Rose didn't vote 2 years ago. What we have to do is energize our youth. We've got to get them to come out. There's about 3 to 5 million people who've never voted who are ready to come out if they get excited. And what Rose is saying is we can get them excited, and we are the people we've been waiting for. Okay? So the adults in the room, which is all of us with any gray hair at all, and those without hair even better so, what we have to do is we've got to back up this youthful movement and say, you know what? It's not an extreme belief that we could live in a planet that sustains human life. That's not a dream. That's the default condition. Okay? And there is no backup planet, right? And forget Mars, it ain't going to happen, even though my buddies in Silicon Valley think they're going there. Okay, so next question or comment, please.
Yeah, hi, this is a question for Margaret, Dr. Klein. I am a local solar energy and energy storage contractor, and I want to know the psychology of how I mediate or intervene with a customer that seems like they're into it and they like it and the proposal's great, and then, you know, it can be a phenomenal payback, 3.5 to 6.5 years cash on cash. It's very conservative, and they just, you know, I think I'll get that BMW instead. Like, how do I mitigate that and, you know, balance the client, you know, contractor relationship?
I would say when you install solar, you're not just making a personal decision. You're doing something that everyone can see, that your neighbors can see, that people who drive by your home can see. You're joining a movement, and it has ripple effects. You know, if you install solar, other people, the people that live next door to you and on your block are more likely to do the same, you know, because they're gonna look at what you're doing. And so, I mean, yeah, I would encourage people to, I know that when people are making the decision to put renewable energy in their home, that they're often thinking about, you know, brass tacks of price and reliability and installation and all that stuff. But I would tell them also, you're joining a movement here, and it's incredibly important. I mean, it's not just an energy decision or a household decision. It's a moral decision and a spiritual decision and a political decision, and invite your clients to join you on that level as well.
I'd also tell them that they're going to pay for the BMW and the solar will pay for itself. This lady right here, please.
Yeah, hi. I'm a teacher in Santa Barbara Unified, and I just worked with Santa Barbara Unified to get them to pass a climate change resolution. So I'm very happy, and I just want to publicly acknowledge that. My name's Ellen Hunter, and I'm also part of a local new chapter we just started, Climate Reality Project, from a group of us that did training with Al Gore in August in LA. So there's good news about Santa Barbara Unified. It was a very strong resolution, and I firmly believe education, and somebody mentioned high schools, I mean, that's key, because it's the children in front of us that will be affected, and we have to do it very carefully as well, because I'm a kindergarten teacher, but I'm already starting to find ways to sort of carefully talk about things. A direct question. You mentioned, Margaret, you know, we're doing a lot of talking about fossil fuels and energy. You mentioned very briefly, but didn't really talk about agriculture, animal agriculture. And I do want to say that I'm very proud to say that Santa Barbara Unified does serve a plant-based meat in the district, which is really awesome. So I just want to mention, I just want to know, like, you didn't really touch upon it. Where do we go on that route within our community?
Yeah, thank you. I think it is really important, and obviously to solve the climate crisis, we need to get off fossil fuels and we need to leave them in the ground. That is for sure. But that's not actually the whole story. And how industrialized, animal-intensive agriculture, as we've really practiced and pioneered in this country, monocropping, pesticide-intensive, I mean, it is a major part of what's killing us, and certainly what's killing all of the insects. And I mean, it demands just as big a transformation as in energy. And where we need to go, everybody knows we need to get on renewable energy. That's clear. But the agricultural version of that, where we need to go, is local food, right? during World War II, Americans grew 40% of our vegetables at home, in the front yard, in the backyard. I mean, we can grow food in our homes. Why not? Right? Like, have we lost that ability? And in our communities. So when you grow food locally, you're improving food security in your community. You are cutting down on shipping, because we do crazy things in our current industrial agricultural system where we ship food all over the place. I mean, so localizing food and community gardening is a huge thing. And I mean, I think starting victory gardens now that are carbon negative and compost and organic permaculture, that's a big part of it. And we need to way cut down on meat and dairy. I mean, we can't keep factory farming animals. It's not morally right, and it's not okay for the climate. So one thing the climate mobilization calls for, which again, I mean, is kind of obvious, but is a ban on factory farms, right? Like So rather than thinking of the climate mobilization and the move to restore a safe climate and achieve sustainability across all areas, rather than viewing that as just energy, it's really about every sector of the economy, and agriculture being a huge part.
That's why I brought it up, because we really need to be tackled from many angles. And
Absolutely.
sometimes we get fixated on fossil fuels, which is huge.
Yeah.
But there's multiple layers.
Yep.
Yeah, my good friend Wayne Silby, who's been a friend for 40 years, and he founded a company called the Calvert Group, which was the first social responsible investment fund in America, in the world actually. And he started a company called Beyond Meat. Some of you may have heard about it. It's been outrageously successful. Another example of how the conversion actually will create more fortunes than it costs.
Okay. Let's say that we convert completely in this country to non-use of fossil fuels, coal, oil, and we do everything that we're talking about. That's the United States. In the meantime, China, India, they are putting out a lot of bad emissions. How do we deal with the rest of the emissions from the rest of the world?
Yeah, first of all, remember the great admonition, there's no power on earth like an idea whose time has come. And so I had the good fortune to write a small memorandum to, at that time, the incoming Prime Minister of India, Modi. And he was asked by someone, and they asked me to write him a note about what was the alternative to coal. And so I wrote him a note about microgrids. 2 years later, India had already built 6. They are extraordinarily successful. Modi has has developed the belief that microgrids are the future for India. Now, here's a problem. And the problem is they have so much graft and corruption in India that the ability to switch the politics to behind the solution that's technically and economically feasible is difficult. But because it's an idea whose time has come, because it's so much less expensive, it's going to develop a momentum. People don't need to worry about what China and India will do. China and India are going to follow their own self-interest, but it turns out their self-interest is the same as ours. Okay, and if you want to know where the disasters are hitting the worst, you should see what's going on in India. The death and destruction, we're going from drought to deluge with great regularity. What used to be a reasonably predictable season. Do you know that there are more farmers in India that have committed suicide in the last year than in the prior 20 years? Because you can't deal with climate change by ignoring it. Putting your head in the sand, the ostrich-like technique will not work. Modi knows that. Now, he's got problems, serious problems. The political problems in India are horrific. They're probably not worse than ours, but they're bad. And in that context, he knows what the answer is, and he's going to try and get there. We know what the answer is. We got to try and get there. And if we do our part, what we'll do is we'll help to demonstrate that answer clearer and clearer. As an example, we pioneered solar. The Chinese are making more money on it. God bless them. We pioneered wind. The Chinese and the Indians are making more money on it today than we are. God bless them. We are pioneering fuel cell technology. Not sure who will end up winning on that one, but we could still win on that one. And you can bet that the Chinese and the Indians will follow as well. So the technologies that are deploying now globally are massive, and they have the force of power that you can't stop. Nobody sat down and said, gee, are we going to convince people to stop burning wood and start burning coal? It happened because coal was a better answer at that time. And no one's going to have to tell India or China where their economic interests lie. And if you haven't checked, China's doing a major attack now on its health problem, which is coming directly from coal and vehicle emissions. And they know it. And that's a political problem for the Communist Party in China. And they don't like problems, the Communist Party in China. So they'll solve it.
Coal power plants in China, it's increasing.
Yeah, it's increasing right now.
So it seems to me that it's in their own self-interest, it seems to you. Nevertheless, they have forces within China that are pushing themselves to do.
That's true, Evan. That's really true. But it's a snapshot in time, okay? So right now, Beijing is practically unlivable most of the year, and they know that. And their political power resides on their ability to keep people happy and going. There's only 1% to 2% of the entire population of China is a Communist Party member. So the only way they maintain power is if they can keep a livable society. I believe that you will find, if we can continue to pioneer technologies in the West, continue to demonstrate they're more economic, then we'll be successful. And by the way, a big part of the coal problem in China is a result of what's going on in Australia, and the Australians are now rebelling against their own coal problem, if you haven't noticed. There's a town in Australia 2 weeks ago that received 4 feet of rain in less than 1 week. The entire town was submerged. They didn't have to worry for the sewers to back up. The whole town went underwater. And Australia is the #1 coal exporter to China. So it's happening. And see, don't look at today and say, oh, gee, people are sort of putting up with it. Well, it's kind of like the boiling frog issue, right? If you slowly turn up the heat, the frog doesn't jump out of the pot. You turn it up suddenly, or you throw it into a hot boiling pot, frog jumps out. It's getting to the boiling point. And that, together with the technology that we're pioneering in the West, just like we pioneered wind, just like we pioneered solar, if anybody had said 20 years ago that you could produce solar power in Dubai for 1.5 cents per kilowatt, when it used to cost 25 cents a kilowatt, you'd say, oh, that's impossible. It's there. So who's the largest solar farm in the world is now in Dubai. Did you know that? Did you know that the largest desal plant is there? And here's another one. Did you know that the first power plant in the world that actually is negative on emissions, meaning they reduce the emissions below zero, has been operating in Iceland for 1.5 years. It's operated with geothermal power, and they're using their excess energy to scrub CO2 out of the atmosphere. It's happening today. Italy's about to get a similar plant. It's going to go online in 4 months, and more will come like popcorn.
Can I add something?
Please.
So the climate mobilization advocates that the United States should make reaching global zero emissions our top foreign policy priority, right? Currently, it's like the opposite. It's about extractivism everywhere. So, we've talked about a Green New Deal, World War II scale climate mobilization, and there's also a Marshall Plan that's needed. Or if you look in World War II, the example of like arming the allies, not just ourselves, right? Like we don't, just because they're different countries doesn't mean we have nothing to do with them. In fact, a lot of those emissions, about 15% of Chinese emissions, are because they're making imports for us, right? So President Xi of China has talked about an ecological civilization, right? They know that that's where they need to go. And I think we can help them and everyone. I think that's kind of our responsibility.
Absolutely right. And she wrote an article, 2 of them actually, that are excellent. You should go online and get them. If you can't find them, just write us info@worldbusiness and we'll send them to you. But she talks about the synthetic rubber revolution. So what percentage of synthetic rubber replaced rubber in World War II when we wanted to do it?
I can't tell you off the
I think
top.
it's about 75, 76%. So what we did is we said, we can't get rubber because it all grew in trees that are now controlled by the Japanese. So we created synthetic rubber. And what Margaret's saying is absolutely correct. We need to be the world leader, not just in the technology, but this should be our #1 policy objective as a State Department. And if we don't have leadership that's willing to make it the #1, change your leadership. It's time. And we're out of time. Anybody else? Yeah, Joan, you want to comment, Madam Supervisor, you want to comment on that at all?
Well, I think of it being at a dais like this and these various issues come, and you can't lead a parade if there's nobody there. And I'll tell you the voice that really is heard, and it's the young people claiming and seizing their future. And that's what, I've been in this for a lot of years, but it's what gives me hope for the future, because I do see something new in the air. And I think we all felt heartened by the Green New Deal, that finally in Washington somebody could put together a set of policies that are taking us the right direction. I was a little disappointed that Nancy Pelosi thought maybe it's too far out there, we got to track more to the middle, but it is a matter of will, and we need to think about our role, the gray-haired ones of us here. It's to create a future for our children and their children and the other species that we share this planet with. And so we need to bring them to the table. We need to hear them, because it really does resound, that voice. And when I heard Rose speak, for example, at the Granada, I was on my feet. This is what I've been waiting for, and I hope she's at every Board of Supervisors meeting.
All the women that are now serving in the United States Congress.
Thank you. I know she left, but shout out to Rose for being here and doing all this work. I had a realization in the middle of her speech that she was born in the year 2000, and being even 26, that was a wow moment. Like, 19-year-old is doing more than I am, so I want to get plugged in, but I want to know how I can get involved with the climate mobilization and the Sunrise Movement locally in Santa Barbara.
How about somebody from the Climate Mobilization Santa Barbara want to field that?
Okay, just take a note, write bob@worldbusiness.org, and he'll plug you into whichever you want.
You can also go to climatemobilization.org, and we can fill out a little form, and we can route you to. But I mean, Bob and Grace, they're here, so.
And if you
I would just.
that tonight, we have the email. We'll send an invitation. We'll send that information.
Yeah. We're going to keep those. We promised that we'd let people go at 7:15. We're almost there. If you have to go, please don't feel bad about it. We're going to keep this going for a few more minutes. And if you would also watch for your emails, there'll be another meeting like this in a month or so. We'll tell you the topic then and who the guests are, but keep your eyes peeled for that. Okay, next, ma'am over here.
Hi, there are several of us here from the local chapter of Citizens Climate Lobby. And we already have a bill that is in the House. It's called the Energy Innovation and Carbon Dividend Act. It is bipartisan. We are a local but also national organization. We lobby in every district in the country. And the goal is to also have this same bill be submitted in the Senate by June. I caught Rose as she was leaving to see whether or not the Green New Deal would be open to supporting a bill that's already in the legislature. She said to contact someone else at Sunrise. So I'm wondering if either of you have a comment on that. We love the Green New Deal. It is a framework. But we actually have specific legislation already in the House, and our local representative Salud supports it. There is a website that talks about the bill and how many jobs it would create and without how many years the emissions would be reduced.
And before you answer that, Mark, Salud's going to be our guest on the show this Friday, from 5 to 6 p.m., and that's one of the topics on the show. So call in. You'll be able to talk to Salud directly. We'll be taking questions on air from 5 to 6 p.m., channel 1290. I'm sorry, go ahead, Margaret.
So carbon pricing has been a very effective means in, for example, Europe, of reducing emissions over decades, right? Because they priced gasoline and oil, that it's over time, it has had an impact. But we are so late in the game that I don't think pricing can protect us. I think we need a stronger and faster solution.
Back here, Jason.
So people keep repeating, what kind of action can we take? And I just want to encourage you as a city policymaker, come to city council meetings. A lot of the things that have been talked about tonight have been on our agenda for 2, 3, 4 years. And if we have you stepping forward and acknowledging your desires to move in this direction, it'll help council and city staff to move forward that much faster.
Nothing like an angry mob to motivate our political leadership. Right here, you're next.
I'm also a clinical psychologist and obsessed with all this. And this interchange we just had, I'd like to try to formulate a thought and share it with both these ladies. Think in an organization, the way organizations get strategic success is by creating alignment across business units and divisions. And there are so many, there's 1,700 nonprofits in Santa Barbara County. And there's a bunch of powerful organizations that are forming in the climate movement. And each one of those organizations needs to do solicitations and funding and pay salaries. So they're siloed around fundraising. But if you can create a collective alignment because you share the same values and you share essentially the same mission, although you and Sunrise are kind of on the outside edge, there are all these other somewhat less progressive approaches that have a lot of power and potentially momentum. So the input I have for you is, and any other, Bill McKibben and the rest of it, to the extent that you can create alignment across multiple organizations on a shared mission, you will be much more effective in accomplishing the goals we all seek.
Thank you.
Hi, this question is for Margaret. Margaret, I've been thinking a lot about the analogy of the World War II, and yes, we were able to mobilize in 4 years and change everything. But my question is, that was the Nazis, okay? How do we get the general public to see the climate threat in the same view as the Nazis?
Yeah. I think that is like the question. And when we look at the history of World War II in this country, we were in denial for a long time. We were in isolation mode. After World War I, we just said, we don't want any of this. War is terrible. We demilitarized. And when Hitler was sweeping through Europe and Japan was expanding its empire, we said, not our business, right? Not our war. And we said that for years until Pearl Harbor woke us up. So I think it is important to remember that in World War II, we also faced years of denial until we had a collective awakening. But I do definitely agree that it is easier, so much easier, for us to understand an external threat against a hated and feared other than it is to understand that this is something that these abstract concepts, and we're to blame in some way, and it's confusing and it's highly emotional. Because in war, you get to do this really cool emotional trick where you say, the enemy is all bad, we're heroic, and that feels good, and we're gonna beat them. And with climate change, it's not so easy, it's not so simple, it's not so primitive. So I honestly think that the answer to your question involves the next phase of humanity, basically. I mean, to be able to acknowledge and respond to a threat that's not a hated and feared other, but is actually a systemic issue that involves acknowledging our own complicity. And I think that the ongoing and accelerating natural disasters offer us a lot of opportunities for collective awakening. Rose was kind of talking about that with Sunrise. Every time that there's catastrophic wildfires or mudslides or drought or hurricanes or whatever, we need to turn those events into opportunities for collective awakening. And we really haven't so far. We have not politicized them, even though they are inherently political. So yeah, it's a huge challenge. I think the only way we can do it is if we have a national consensus that we're in danger. And I mean, it should be doable, given that it's true and it's expressing itself all the time. And I think that having options on the table that would actually provide effective protection make it a lot easier to recognize the danger that exists, because we're not helpless. There's actually a plan. We just need to support it. So yeah.
Yeah, I just want to add one thing to Margaret's point. In 1934, this goes to political leadership in the Green New Deal. In 1934, Roosevelt realized the threat, and he knew the American public was not ready. So in an act of leadership, he created and pushed through Congress the thing called the Lend-Lease Act, which was in effect by 1936. So we were arming Europe in 1936, and he was preparing the transition for the American economy. He'd already had General Motors making tanks. He had airplanes being built by Ford. And so and by the way, the guy who was in charge of the logistics ended up being the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff during all of World War II. The Marshall Plan is named after George C. Marshall. And he was the one who figured out how to do it, because he was a logistical powerhouse. And so I think what happens is we have to call on political leadership to lead or get the hell out of the way. You know, there's this great sign on Ted Turner's desk. It says, lead, follow, or get the hell out of the way. And that's where we are with political leadership. They're going to have to lead or follow or get the hell out of the way. And we have to demand that, because it's us. That's the point. The message of Sunrise, the message of the climate mobilization, it's us. So if we push, and you heard Jason a minute ago before he left, the city councilman, come to the city council, be us in the room, and you'll see what happens, what changes. I'm going to because I don't want to prevail on our panelists any longer, I'm going to ask for one last question or comment before we go, and then we'll wrap it up.
Say something? Can I say something?
Please.
Okay. So back to your question about what's the difference between World War II. I just watched a movie called The Resistance Banker. I'm sure many of you have heard it. And its subtitles are in Dutch. And it was about this Dutch banker who got approached by a man to help fund the resistance. Now, this Dutch banker had everything to lose, his family, himself, his life. And if he would have just stayed quiet, he would have been fine. And nothing was going to affect him. But he decided to save thousands of people. And so illegally, he stole almost $500 million from the Dutch bank, thus funding the war for years. They finally have a shrine outside of the Dutch bank in Amsterdam. And the only difference I could think in my mind was he had a gun basically held to his head. When he got in trouble, he could be killed. We don't have that same trouble that he has. It's a choice. We might pay, like you said, we think a little different, pay a little different, but really we're saving a lot of money and we're not being threatened to be killed like he did. And it just reminded me of that movie. And so I just wanted to say that we all have that capability. And he was thinking about the now because it was affecting him in the now, and ours is in the when. So that's.
Thank you. So, Margaret, you want to add?
I just want to say that it's a perfect ending, because what you're talking about is heroism, and my grandmother survived the Holocaust, and I grew up being taught that being a bystander was no better than participating in moral atrocities. And I mean, the spirit that you're talking about, I mean, we want to think, oh, well, if I was alive during that time, I would have done something like that. You know, I wouldn't have just gone, I wouldn't have just been a good German. I wouldn't have just gone with it. I would have stood up. I would have been part of the resistance. This is our chance.
I'm going to end with one observation. Last time we were here, we were not served plastic bottles for water. We insisted on a pitcher of water. How many of us are willing to give up our plastic bottles? Okay? It starts with that. I can guarantee you there won't be any more plastic bottles next time, right? So what I'm saying here is it's not necessarily, and I think heroism is the right word, but you can do little things that are very heroic, and you can do big things. But what you can't do is stand by and do nothing. So think about that, and thanks all for coming tonight. We really appreciate your support.